Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Monday and welcome to Norse Studies Week 7. Yay! It has been a minute. My recent illness had a rather devastating effect upon my video schedule and for my own personal studies. But rather than just kind of phoning in and doing something so-so and half-assed, I decided to wait until I was back at full strength to dive back in. And I'm ready. I have missed this. I have definitely missed having the energy necessary to do this, and it feels good to be getting back on track. But this has also given me time to reflect upon what it is I've learned so far and to speculate what would it have been like to have understood and known about all of these things for all of my life, and that putting things into practice was just second nature. Because ultimately, that is the goal. I want to be so rooted that I don't have to consciously think about how I worship, the why of it all, what I sacrifice, how I celebrate, what magic I practice. I just want it to become a reflex, just a part of my daily life and of my character. So, with that overarching goal in view, back we go to the Heathen Handbook by Woden's Folkkin. We are diving into section 4, the Aesir. Now, most of us who are familiar with Norse paganism are already aware of this, but just in case anyone watching is not, the Aesir are a specific tribe of deities who trace their ancestry to Bor. And of course, we begin with Odin because we could begin nowhere else. And the authors included the other forms of his name: Othin, Woden, Wotan, and Wodan. His titles include Allfather, Chief of the Aesir, Giver of Victory, and he is the god of poetry, magic, and wisdom. And now his appearance, again, for any of the viewers who may be unfamiliar, is that of a one-eyed man at his peak, oftentimes wearing a hooded blue cloak and a broad-brimmed hat rather when he's visiting humans. For a quick mental image, just think of how Gandalf the Grey looks in Lord of the Rings. That'll give you an idea. Odin is known for giving a handsome and noble countenance to his friends and a very grim face to his enemies. Other names of Odin include Grimnir, the Masked One, Bolverk, Work of Ill, at least amongst the giants, Valfather, Father of the Battle Slain, just to name a few. Really, whenever he was going traveling, oftentimes he was going incognito, so that's where a lot of these different names really crop up. Odin is both the lord of the Aesir, king of Asgard, and a wanderer. He is warrior and poet, a magician and trickster. He creates order, and he destroys it. Of course, we know Odin as one of the creator gods. His vision of the world that he wanted was quite different from the one he was born into, so he deliberately brought about that which he wished to have. What he imagined then came into being. And in the myth that describes the creation and origin of humans, it is Odin who is credited with bestowing upon us our soul, which is sometimes described as our breath or our spirit. Next, we learn about the god Tyr, also called Tiwu or Tiwaz. He is a warrior god, but he is also a god of laws. His father was a giant, likely Hemnir, who was probably a frost giant, and his mother was an unnamed goddess. His appearance is that of a man, but he's still youthful. And of course, he is missing one of his hands as a result of the part he played in the binding of Fenrir. As mentioned earlier, Tyr was a god of warriors, but the warriors of Tyr were and are different from the warriors of Odin. Tyr's warriors are more focused not upon the lust for the battle or any glory that could be gained from it in and of itself, but more upon the defense of the folk and being in service to the folk. Rather than in ancient times, these warriors of Tyr becoming a tyrannical or an out-of-control force, there was an expectation and a culture of restraint, which was born of a sincere devotion to the folk and not some mad quest for power. Tyr was also a lawgiver. He dispensed justice. He is the ruler of the Thang, aka the Assembly, in which our ancestors created laws and to settle disputes. It also played an important role by putting a check on the power of tribal leaders and kings. It helped restore individual rights when they were infringed upon. Now, while the Thing did name a king, it was the king's duty to be an upholder of the customs and laws that had long since been established by the folk, very similar to the concept of constitutional monarchy as it has evolved into our present day. And of course, this process all preserved order and stability in the society. Now for Frigga, also called Frigg. Now, if I remember properly, it was specifically the Anglo-Saxon pagans who used the name Frigga, and the Scandinavian and the Germanic cousins were more likely to call her Frigg. Now, to my ears, Frigga just sounds prettier, so that's what I tend to use. She is considered to be the greatest of all the goddesses, the wife of Odin, mother of Balder, the realms of marriage, motherhood, weaving, and all the duties and the powers of women are in Frigga's domain. She is known for her resourcefulness, her foresight, stick-to-itiveness, and a devotion for all who she loves. Interestingly, whenever Frigga and Odin find themselves at odds, it is generally Frigga who prevails, at least according to the myth. So I guess sometimes she just has to take an interesting route, we'll put it that way, to get her way about things in the end. But I suppose that strategy is often required when dealing with husbands, be they gods or men. Frigga's origins are a bit shrouded. We know from the Eddas that she's the daughter of someone called Fjordgiven, but it's possible that this name is the masculine form of the name Fjordgin. If this has raised the possibility that Fjordgiven and Fjordgin are a divine pair, like Freyr and Freya. There's a scholar by the name of Victor Rydberg who suggests that Frigga is actually the Vannic goddess Nethris, who is mentioned by Tacitus. If this is true, then Frigga is both the sister and the ex-wife of Njord, and that would make her the mother of Freyr and Freya. However, we don't have proof positive about this, so it remains just a theory, one that the book's authors happen to lean towards, but it is still theory. Some modern Norse pagans like to call Frigga the All-Mother, and if she is indeed mother to both Aesir and Vanir deities alike, then that title is especially fitting. Frigga is believed to have handmaidens, all goddesses in their own right and each with their own specific responsibilities. The authors mentioned a few of them. We have Lofin, who deals with love between men and women, Fulla, who promotes friendship between women, Hlin, protector of Frigga's favorite warriors in battle, Nja, a messenger, Saga, keeper of the lore of the folk, Air, a healer, Vor, protector of wedding vows, and Snortra, who rewards women for good behavior. Excuse me. As you can tell, I'm still negotiating with the poor throat. But going on, as Odin's wife, Frigga is the queen of Asgard. Now, as we mentioned, sometimes her agenda and Odin's agenda aren't exactly similar, but she tends to pursue her own agenda independently, as she has both the power and the authority to do so as queen of Asgard. And if we look at the historical record, many of the Scandinavian and Germanic queens, they were often very strong, very independent rulers in their own right. Now, the domestic sphere also belongs to Frigga, and the ancestors' ideas and customs about both the responsibilities and the privilege of women in society revolved around their concept of who Frigga was as a goddess. Of course, we have the roles of wife and mother, and the keeper of the keys, symbolizing the responsibility to help provide for the family, ensuring their food security, and making sure that everyone was properly clothed. Frigga is the chief helper in all domestic pursuits as well as a defender of the household. Her own efforts to protect Balder, her son, while ultimately unsuccessful, is nevertheless a testament to the devotion of Frigga, and it's an example that can be imitated by all women. Frigga is a mentor and teacher of women in general, particularly married women and mothers who are striving to care for their husbands, children, extended family, and community. Frigga also practiced magic and knows the fate of all beings. However, she does not choose to prophesy. This is akin to the intuition of human women, as being a reflection of Frigga's own capabilities. And just as Frigga does not share what she knows of the future, sometimes we women do not always share what our intuition is telling us, at least not right away, not until we're sure of the ground we're on. Next up is Thor, also called Donar, Thunar, and Thunor. Not only is he the god of thunder, his very name means thunder. He wields the hammer Mjolnir, which means mauler or crusher, which very satisfying image. Smash, smash, smash. Anyway, going on, he is a defender of the folk from giants as well as religions seeking to conquer the folk. The authors credit Thor with the reawakening of paganism and heathenry, at least in the Norse context. Thor is described as being red-headed, absolutely huge, very mighty, known for his astounding appetite for both food and drink, and as a faithful companion to humanity and the gods. He's quick to laugh and he's quick to anger. Whatever it is he's feeling, it is at full throttle. He is the defender of humans and often called the Midgard Watcher. Now, frequently he takes himself off to Jotunheim to fight frost giants, but he's always ready to return to Asgard to aid the gods. Thor is quite straightforward as a deity. He was a god of farmers. He was a family man. Whenever he encounters a problem, his instinct is to face it head on and for him to take a very hands-on problem-solving approach. It's likely that Thor was the most universally worshipped god for our ancestors. Next, we have the goddess Sif, wife of Thor. She's young, golden-haired, beautiful. She's called a goddess of the harvest and is considered the mother of the next generation of gods. Where Frigga is the experienced and the established matriarch, Sif is the young bride who is finding her way. Sif is devoted to the work of ensuring a successful harvest so that life can continue. And if we picture her in the midst of the childbearing years, it reinforces the idea of her being the means through which new life comes into being and can be sustained. Now, if we think about the marriage rites of the ancestors, part of what was involved was the exchange of practical gifts, be it livestock, something needed for the household, or sword and shield. It was all about ensuring that the new couple had a solid start in life, and it was understood that taking on the role of husband and wife was taking on a proper job that had both rights and responsibilities, and they had to be met because their own lives and the lives of their future children depended upon it. So when we think of Sif as a bride, it's good to have this context in our minds. Husbands and wives were to be complementary partners to each other, and this was exemplified by Thor and Sif in the lore. Now we have Heimdall next on the docket. Excuse me again. We know him as the guardian of the Bifrost Bridge. He has the responsibility of blowing the horn and warning of Ragnarok to ready the rest of the gods for battle. However, he is not limited to this. He also brought culture to Midgard, and he is seen as the father of the classes of society. According to the lore, Heimdall was born of 9 maidens, all sisters, which is a most unusual form of birth, to be sure. He is called the Watchman because his chief responsibility is to stand guard at the Bifrost, to warn of the approach of any enemies, and to be ready for when Ragnarok comes. Heimdall's other role is that of a symbolic father of humankind. While he's not one of the creator gods, he is the source for the social classes of our species. First, he traveled our world and he met a common laborer, stayed at the man's home for 3 nights, and then 9 months later, the laborer's wife had a son who became the father of all thralls, hard laborers, slaves, and freemen, and they comprised the lower class of our ancestors' world. Then Heimdall visited the home of a free farmer, and 9 months after his stay, the farmer's wife had a son that was named Karl. Karl went on to be the forebearer of all freeholders, be they small farmers, merchants, or skilled laborers. Next, Heimdall went to the home of a wealthy man and fathered a son that was called Jarl. Jarl is the ancestor of all the nobility of our ancestors. These were the social and the religious leaders, and because of their position, Heimdall later came back to instruct Jarl about everything that a leader and a ruler should know. Creating this social structure also created order, and where there is order, there can be more learning, and indeed it was Heimdall who bestowed knowledge of the runes to human beings. And because Heimdall mingled his blood with that of humans, it had the effect of reinforcing our connection with the divine. Odin and the other creator gods brought us into being, but it was Heimdall who infused us with that extra spark of the divine and established a literal kinship between humans and the gods. Heimdall sets the pattern of gift giving and building relationships, and how all societies are essentially based upon these family relationships that then become extended community relationships. Now, for the next part, this is where the authors and I absolutely part company. You may have guessed it, they take quite a dim view of Loki, based upon what is quite frankly a superficial interpretation of the lore and the determination to view Loki as a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling villain. This is without doubt the most disappointing part of the book. When we look at how they deal with the other gods and with basic concepts of this religion as a whole, the authors take on a very nuanced perspective. They have clearly delved deep and they have thought things through, and they have actively advised taking a literalist interpretation. But when it comes to Loki, it's a different story altogether. It's very shallow. It represents a childish understanding of that is based upon the words of a Christian who wrote the lore and needed a villain for the narrative that he was creating. Now, to justify their views, the authors wrote, quote, "In the Havamal, Odin advises us to judge a wife when wedded, a weapon when tried, ice when 'tis crossed, and ale when 'tis drunk. We should likewise judge Loki by the result of his actions and realize that he leads evil forces against gods and men at Ragnarok. At first glance, that sounds completely reasonable. But here's the problem. It requires that we ignore the relationship of cause and effect. It requires that we ignore the fact that when Loki was at odds with the gods, that was a reaction. It was a response. We're not looking at what preceded that conflict. And without understanding how problems came into being and the roles that all parties involved play, then we can neither judge the situation nor can we judge the actions taken in response or the ultimate outcome. Furthermore, these authors are effectively promoting a literalist interpretation of Loki and his role in the myths, after all those previous chapters counseling against that very thing. The perpetuation of Loki as a villain is an emotionally driven impulse, and it speaks of the human tendency to create scapegoats and to indulge in intellectual laziness. I have literally spent over a year creating Loki videos, not only talking about what I've researched, but chronicling the working relationship that I have with him. They're in a playlist on my YouTube channel. And this is where I make the case to take a deeper look at his character, his actions, and his function within the mythos. And for this reason, I will make no further reference to what the authors have to say about Loki. And if you would like a full explanation of my viewpoint on the matter, I refer you to the year's worth of videos discussing that subject. So, next section. It discusses Balder, his wife Nanna, and his twin brother Hoder. Balder and Hoder are the sons of Frigga and Odin. They were both warriors. Balder was beloved and seen as someone who could create peace, but Hoder was more of a straight fighter and hunter. Balder's wife Nanna was a daughter of the moon, and many consider her to be a moon goddess in her own right, which is interesting because some associate Balder with the sun. They have a son called Forseti, and his judgments are considered to be so even-handed and just that everyone accepts what he says without further dispute. Now, apparently, Hoder one day was out and about, and he met a pleasant-seeming giant who offered him hospitality. Hoder accepted, but the giant enchanted Hoder to turn a lustful eye to Nanna, and he wasn't able to overcome that magic. He ended up trying to kidnap her, got caught, and he fled, and then he went to war with all of the Aesir. Now, he wasn't able to hold them back, and so Hoder was defeated. Odin broke the spell that had enchanted him, and Balder ultimately forgave Hoder. But their relationship had been damaged, and it really didn't get repaired. After this, Balder began having dreams about his own death, and upon hearing this, his mother Frigga went to great lengths to prevent it, making all things to swear an oath not to harm Balder, with the exception of mistletoe. The gods concluded that Balder was now invulnerable, and they had the brilliant idea of having a game where they would throw weapons at him and just watch the weapons bounce off of him, and apparently this was most amusing. Now, the way the authors of the book tell the tale, it does vary from other tellings that I've come across. Most often I read that Hoder was blind and he was given a spear made of mistletoe by Loki, who then guided his hand and then he thus killed Balder. But in this book, the authors say that Hoder was just playing the let's throw things at Balder game with the rest of the gods, and that Loki had put a mistletoe arrow in his quiver, and that Hoder was unaware of this and he innocently shot and killed his brother. Hoder ran because of his past magic-induced dispute with Balder. He believed the gods would punish him terribly, and he was correct. Soon after, another son of Odin, Vali, killed Hoder in revenge. Actually, it was Vili. Yeah, that's what it was. Then there was a funeral pyre for Balder. During the course of things, Nanna died of grief, and then they just placed her on the same pyre. The following day, Frigga asked if there was any amongst the gods who were brave enough to go to the underworld to try to bring Balder back. Funny how she didn't ask for the daughter-in-law, but moving on. Yet another son of Odin volunteered for this job. This was Hermod the Bold. Odin let him ride Sleipnir to get there. He saw Hel, goddess of the dead, and she said she would permit Balder to return if every living thing wept for Balder. The word went out that all of creation must weep, and they did, apart from a giantess called Thok, who the Aesir concluded was Loki. Now, because of that, Balder had to remain where he was, and then the gods bound Loki in revenge, and there you have it. Now, other sources paint Balder as this representation of life, light, growth, the growing season, and Hodor was represented as death, darkness, and winter. So I disagree with the authors in characterizing this incident as good versus evil or the forces of chaos against the forces of order. This strikes me more so as the progression of the seasons, and that the attempt to prevent this progression resulted in drastic measures being taken to ensure that the natural order was unfolded. And seeing as how that there is a belief, which is acknowledged by the authors, that the death of Balder occurred on the summer solstice, I think that lends weight to my theory. It also puts the tale of Balder and Hodor into a context that's more akin to the cycle of the Oak King and the Holly King that we see in Celtic mythos. And when people talk about that, it doesn't involve anyone having fit of the vapors about what a pity it is that anything ever happened to the Oak King, or about the perceived evils of the natural order and the seasons. Now, lastly, the authors briefly mention the rest of the Aesir. Not much is known about these deities, so there isn't as long of a section about them. We have Olyr, son of Sith and stepson of Thor. He's an outstanding archer and ski runner, a warrior, apparently rather attractive. We have Vidar, son of Odin, known for his silence and for being almost as strong as Thor. Next, we have Bragi, a god of poetry, who, according to my previous research, is also a son of Odin and a giantess. And then we have Idun, sometimes called Idunna, the wife of Bragi and a keeper of the apples that ensure the longevity and vitality of the gods. Now, one person is conspicuously missing, and that is the goddess Sigyn, Loki's wife and the mother of his sons Narfi and Vali. Why the authors didn't mention her, especially when she has a universally good reputation, I can't quite make out, but there we are. And that does it for Section 5. And that does it for my first serious disagreement with the authors themselves. Now, disagreements over theological issues and interpretations and opinions over various gods and ideas and everything else, this is not uncommon within the pagan community. Now, so while I do find that the author's view of Loki is disappointing at best and disgraceful at worst, I will at least give them credit for expressing a view that they genuinely hold. Now, on these occasions, it's a good opportunity to reflect upon our own convictions and upon what ground those convictions stand, especially once our emotions get involved. Sometimes our emotions are a complete reaction just to what we think, and that the stronger our emotion is a reflection of the strength of the intellectual conclusion. But other times our feelings are misguided. They're based upon misunderstandings, lack of information, or our own desire not to face facts. So it's good to clarify what can be extremely muddy waters. So, on that note, next week, barring accident, illness, or injury, we will discuss the Vanir deities, who are another tribe of gods that the Aesir have a somewhat mixed history with. So, I hope you will come back from that. But thank you for sticking with me through this very long video. Whatever your thoughts, impressions, own conclusions are, please tell me about them in the comment section below, or better yet, come visit me on Gilded. There's a link to join us in the description box, and I would love to have a more involved conversation with you there. But that does it for now, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.